In this video, I'm going to take some fine art architectural images of a subject that is not terribly fine or artistic, but we're going to make it work. And I'll show you how I process one of the images in Photoshop. Well, good morning. I am in downtown Stamford, Connecticut this morning, and came to do some architectural work and trying to find some pretty cool looking buildings and getting a good vantage point. And I found this scene that normally would not attract my attention, but I studied it a bit, and I think it's kind of interesting. So let me get my camera and see if we can get some shots off. So I turned the corner and there's this small street that just really leads to a parking garage, and at first it really does not look that interesting, but if I zoom in, let me see if I can zoom in on the camera, you can see you have some interesting shapes. You got a curve of the parking garage in front, another building in back, and then a building called Landmark Square with the sun hitting it in back. So big dynamic range here, and also the ramp going up to the parking garage. And so I'm thinking I can make something interesting out of this. Let's see what I can come up with. Well, I moved a little closer to the building. Sometimes when you change your vantage point, the scene can really change. I'm going to keep going even closer and try to get this circular part of the parking garage, or the ramp, from underneath with a wide lens. Might be just kind of dirty and messy there, but I'm here and it's probably worth the walk. I think there might be a shot here of this garage ramp. I'm really just trying to make my way around, trying to find a composition that works. I think I'll find something, but just got to be kind of patient and take my time and walk around, get different perspectives. So I stopped on this spot here, and I kind of like the way this ramp is a bit of a leading line into the circular area, and you get this bit jutting off to the right with these lines. So it's really just a matter of geometric shapes, and when I process it in Photoshop, those shapes and those lines will really be enhanced and really show up. That's what I'm seeing right now, not an ugly parking garage, but a series of lines and shapes. I put my wide lens on, got even closer to the parking garage. You can see it behind me. Just kind of really interesting shapes from here. A bit more abstract almost, but I'm going to keep wandering around, getting some decent shots, I think. So I walked up underneath this circular ramp, and I'm trying to get the whole circle in. I've got my wide angle lens, but it's not quite wide enough. I've got my 16 to 35 lens. I could probably go, 10 or 12, but I don't have that lens with me. So I think I might have to get down on the ground as far away as possible and get this shot. So the tricky part about this shot is there's a big dynamic range here. That sky is much brighter than the edges of the garage ramp, which are really in shadow. So you could do a couple things. I could take several shots at different exposures and blend them. I'd have to get my tripod out, and I'm kind of lazy to do that. Or I could just let the sky get blown out and just focus on the parking garage, because the sky's not that interesting anyway, which is what I will probably do. And then lastly, I could always try to adjust the best I can in Photoshop. I'm just kind of walking around this little area and found this other perspective where this curve kind of swoops in nicely. You have those lines up above. Again, very abstract, minimalist, I guess you could say. But sometimes even something as mundane as a parking garage can yield some pretty interesting images. You know, I get some wonderful comments on this channel, and I know a lot of you are photographers, and I would love to see your images. So, if you're on Instagram, for example, in the comments down below, just put your Instagram name, and I'd love to check out your content. Well, I went down one more level, and I'm not sure what this area is. It's just kind of a mess down here. But when I look up, I get a pretty cool vantage point of the garage ramp, this spiral. So once again, I'll use my long lens and try to get some shots of this. So this is actually a pretty cool shot because you got this nice framing. You got the square of these beams here, and then that's kind of circle right in the middle. So again, very abstract, but this is kind of a cool shot. Well, that does it for me. If you are a Photoshop junkie, stick around. I'm going to show you how I process one of those images in Photoshop. If that's not your gig, listen, if you can give me a like, that'd be great if you like this video. And if you like this content, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. For those of you into Photoshop, stick around. So welcome to my iMac. This is the image I'll be working with, and what I want to do is show you how I turn this image into this image. I've done some work already in Lightroom. Pulled up the shadows, pulled down the highlights. I think I cropped it a little bit, but honestly it didn't do too much. And so really the bulk of the work is going to be done in Photoshop. Remember, in Photoshop, there's a lot of ways of doing the same thing. And so if you know a different way or frankly a better way of doing some of the things I'm doing, please put a comment down below. I have already made a number of selections. It took me, probably an hour and a half to make 18, 20 different selections, parts of the building. To do so, I use the polygonal lasso tool, which is really just a series of straight lines. So for the curved areas, I zoom in real tight and I make a series of straight lines, short ones, and just trace around those curved areas. First thing I'll do though is I will convert to black and white. I often do this in Lightroom, but I'll do it in Photoshop. I'll pull maybe down the blues a little bit just to darken that sky a tad. I'm not going to do too much with the sky, honestly. The next thing I'm going to do is work with parts of the building. Now, there really wasn't much direct light. In fact, the sun was rising behind the building. And so the whole thing is kind of flat. I'm going to make the assumption as I process it that if there was a light source, it would be kind of up higher over my right shoulder. And so you'll see when I play with things, that's kind of my underlying assumption, and it's going to hit different parts of the building differently. With the curved sections of the building, I do want to accentuate the curved areas, and I'll show you how I do that. In fact, let's start with that now. Let's go up to, so for the selections, I made the selections already. I went down to select, I hit save selection, I thought of a name for it. Now I can go to load selection, and I've got all my names here. I'm going to probably forget what I called half of them, but I know this one was top curve. And you could see if I zoom in, it's that very top of the structure that is curved. And you could see I had to kind of go around the poles here, but I made a good selection. One thing you can do in an image like this where the concrete or cement, I'm not sure what I should call it, is kind of discolored, you can smooth that out a bit. And this is the one time I will use a levels adjustment layer. But if you choose it, you can sort of, playing with the lines on the bottom and also with the histogram on top, you essentially want to narrow the difference between the brighter highlights and the darker parts of the selection. And you can get to a point where it can really smooth things out a bit. I'm going to move this over. So for example, here's the before, here's the after. It's brighter, but also it's a little bit smoother. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but you could really move them closer together and reduce a lot of those discolorations. Next thing I want to do, I'm going to reselect it, and I'm going to choose a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to brighten up the entire selection. Again, I already brightened it up a bit. I'm going to go a little bit more. I then will reselect. Now, to highlight a curved piece of a building, I think the best thing for me that I do is I choose a gradient tool. I then use the reflected gradient tool. I want my foreground to be white, which it is here on the left. I'm going to start in the middle and pull out to the right, and you can see it's not so pronounced, but let me brighten up a little bit more. The middle of the selection is going to be brighter. And to make it more pronounced, actually, you can choose a curves adjustment layer. We'll darken the outside of it. We can pull down, which is darkening the whole selection, but then I will reselect. I've got my gradient tool selected, the radial gradient tool. This time I want the foreground to be black because I want the outside, not the inside, the middle to be affected. So I can pull, and you get a sense. If I deselect by hitting Command D, here is the before, pretty flat. Actually, here's the real before, right? So cleans it up a bit, and then here's the curvature of it. And I could do the same thing to this curved piece down below. So I have to figure out what I named it, but I think it was curve 3 maybe? Yes, curve 3. So this one, the cement is not as discolored, so I don't really need to adjust it too much. So I'll use a curves adjustment layer. I'll pull up to brighten the selection. I will reselect. I got my gradient tool selected. Foreground I want white, and I can pull out from the middle, and you get that nice curved effect. Let me just deselect that by hitting Command D. I'll do the same thing on the lowest one as well. So if I do load selection, and I probably called it lower curve. Good name. There you go. And so kind of the same thing. I'm going to pull up to brighten up the entire selection. Then reselect. Got my gradient tool and pull out from the middle. And you'll get that very modest but helpful gradient that kind of highlights that curvature. So kind of here's the before, here's the after. For the poles coming down, the vertical poles, some of those I want to highlight kind of the curvature as well. But you can see on these poles that the light is really coming from the right side. And so I don't want to kind of fight with that. So if I hit load selection, round column 1, I can go to my adjustment layer. I can pull up. So I'm using a curves adjustment layer, pull up to brighten up the entire selection. I want to reselect, so I go to select, reselect. This time I'm going to use a linear gradient tool, foreground color is white, and pull in from the right. Whoops, wrong one, sorry. This one here, pull in from the right, and you could see that just the right side, but it really does highlight the curvature of it, and it kind of shows light coming in from the other side. I also darkened the facade of the building. It was red brick in the back, and so all I did there was load selection. I'll call it red brick. Okay, so you can see my selection there. I'll go to my adjustment layer, curves adjustment layer, and pull down. And I did that because I wanted the structure itself, or the ramps and the poles, to pop a little bit more. So I just darkened that background, which removes a bit of distraction. Since the light was kind of up or high up, I assumed it was up high over my kind of right shoulder. Some of the internal pieces I assume would be bright as well. And so I had made that selection. I called it, let's see, leading beam under inner support light. You can see some of those selections, and I just want to brighten that up. So I can go to curves adjustment layer, pull up, and it's going to add some contrast. One last thing I want to show you, and that is some of the curves that are inside. Let me zoom in a little bit. And so what I'm talking about is this area here. It's kind of just the opposite of these outside curves. And so when I want to highlight the curvature, I did kind of just the opposite. And so if I go to load selection, I think I called it inner curve. You can see that selection. I'm going to go to my adjustment layer, a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to pull up, and that'll brighten up the entire selection. I then want the middle of that to be a little darker and it to be brighter on the outside. So I flip this to black being the foreground, and I can pull out from the middle. Oh, I got to change my, I have to change it to a radial gradient tool, sorry. Pull in from the outside, and you can see just that middle part is going to be darker. Here's the before, here's the after, and you can play with it. I can pull it out a little bit more. But it's going to highlight that curved facade. Again, it kind of curves the other way. I did a whole bunch of other things. Let me deselect that. You saw the finished product. If I hit this group, you get a sense of kind of what I did. I hope that was helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, just give a thumbs up if you don't mind. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time.